In the remote mountain town of Pine Valley, Montana, a ruthless outlaw gang made the deadliest mistake of their lives when they decided to threaten a quiet single mother at the Valley Ridge General Store. They had no idea they were harassing one of the most lethal snipers ever to serve in the U.S. military, a woman who'd make them regret ever setting foot in her town. Some targets you only miss once, and the Crimson Riders were about to become her final mission. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind whispered through the pine trees surrounding Valley Ridge, carrying with it the first hints of winter's approach. Dawn painted the mountainsides in hues of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the weathered wooden buildings that lined the town's main street. Sarah Mitchell's boots crunched softly on frost-covered gravel as she approached the general store, her movements displaying the fluid grace of someone who understood the importance of precision. At 38, Sarah carried herself with quiet confidence, her watchful green eyes constantly scanning her surroundings, a habit ingrained from years of military service. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her civilian clothes couldn't quite hide the athletic build of someone who'd never stopped training. To the casual observer, she appeared to be just another local running early morning errands. None would guess that those hands, now carrying a grocery list, had once recorded the longest confirmed kill shot in her unit's history. Old Tom Harper's bell chimed above the door as Sarah entered the store. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked bread mingled with the aromatic pine wood that lined the walls. "Morning, Sarah," Tom called out from behind the counter, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Just got those special vitamins Emma asked for." Sarah's expression softened at the mention of her 12-year-old daughter. "Thanks, Tom. She's still fighting that cold." The store's layout was familiar territory. Sarah had memorized every angle, every line of sight, every potential point of cover. Not that she expected to need such knowledge in Pine Valley, but 15 years as a military sniper had taught her that preparation wasn't paranoia. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles shattered the morning quiet. The sound was wrong for Pine Valley. Too many engines, too aggressive in their approach. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her hip, where a holster would have been, finding only empty air. Through the store's front window, she watched 5 motorcycles roar into town, followed by 3 pickup trucks. The riders' leather cuts bore a distinctive crimson skull, a symbol that had been appearing in news reports with increasing frequency. Tom's face paled as he looked outside. "Sarah," he said quietly, "maybe you should head out the back." But Sarah remained still, her breathing controlled, her mind automatically calculating distances and angles. The Crimson Riders had been moving north through Montana, leaving a trail of terrorized towns in their wake. Now they'd reached Pine Valley, probably assuming this remote mountain community would be an easy target. The store's door burst open, the bell's cheerful chime incongruous with the heavy boots that followed. 3 men entered, their leather cuts adorned with patches marking them as senior members of the gang. Behind them, more riders positioned themselves outside, establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency. These weren't common thugs. They had tactical training. "Well, well," the leader drawled, his voice carrying the hint of a Texas accent. "Looks like we found the local gathering spot." He was tall, with a graying beard and eyes that had seen their share of violence. The patches on his cut identified him as Ghost, a name that had appeared in several federal bulletins Sarah had reviewed during her private security consulting work. Sarah maintained her position, seemingly focused on selecting canned goods, while her mind mapped each man's location, noted their weapons, assessed their training. Through the window's reflection, she counted 12 more gang members outside. Ghost approached Tom, his boots scraping across the wooden floor. "Nice place you got here, old-timer. Shame if anything happened to it. Way I see it, folks in town could use some protection, times being what they are. Tom's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the counter. We don't want any trouble here. Ghost's laugh held no humor. Troubles. Already here, Pops. Question is whether you're smart enough to handle it right. His hand casually brushed back his cut, revealing a holstered pistol. The only trouble, Sarah said clearly, not turning from the shelf, is that you're threatening the wrong town. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to commanding sniper teams. Ghost turned, studying her with new interest. Lady, I don't think you understand the situation here. Sarah finally faced him, her green eyes cold as mountain. Snow, 3 trucks, 15 bikes, 23 men, 8 with military experience judging by their movement patterns, 5 visible sidearms, probably more concealed. 2 men covering the back exit, 3 on the roof of the bank across the street. Did I miss anything? The store fell silent as Ghost's casual demeanor shifted, his hand moving closer to his weapon. You've been counting, he said softly. Question is, why do numbers matter when you're all alone? Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. Funny thing about being alone, makes it easier to find your range. Outside, more motorcycles arrived, their engines echoing off the mountain walls. But Sarah stood unmoving, her posture revealing nothing of the calculations running through her mind, nothing of the muscle memory built through thousands of hours behind a rifle scope. Sarah Mitchell's morning routine had begun long before the Crimson Riders arrived in Pine Valley. At 4:30 a.m., she'd already completed her daily training regimen, a discipline maintained since her military days. The home shooting range she'd constructed in her basement remained her sanctuary, a place where the familiar weight of a rifle and the focus required for precision shots helped center her thoughts. Through her specialized scope, she'd practiced acquiring targets in the pre-dawn. Darkness, her breathing controlled and steady. The basement walls were soundproofed, a renovation she'd undertaken when first purchasing the isolated mountain property 3 years ago. Her daughter, Emma, slept peacefully 2 floors above, unaware of her mother's morning ritual. The technical aspects of shooting had always come naturally to Sarah. During her military career, she'd set records that still stood, though few in Pine Valley knew about that part of her life. Her instructors had called her a prodigy, blessed with an innate understanding of ballistics, wind patterns, and the patience required for long-range precision shooting. But it was motherhood that had truly honed her skills, the fierce protective instinct adding another layer to her already formidable abilities. After her morning practice, Sarah had prepared Emma's breakfast and lunch, moving through their cozy kitchen with the same precision she applied to everything else. Notes were placed in Emma's lunchbox, little messages of encouragement that helped maintain their connection during school hours. The morning sun had just begun painting the mountain peaks when she dropped Emma off at Pine Valley Middle School, watching her daughter's long brown braid bounce as she rushed to meet her friends. The drive to Valley Ridge General Store had given Sarah time to observe the town she'd chosen as their home. Pine Valley sat nestled in a natural fortress of mountain ranges, its location providing both protection and tactical challenges. The surrounding peaks created wind patterns that any skilled sniper would need to account for, patterns Sarah had memorized during countless hours of practice. She'd selected specific vantage points throughout the town, mapping fields of fire and potential cover locations out of professional habit. Now, standing in Tom's store as Ghost and his Crimson Riders established their presence, Sarah recalled her morning's shooting practice. The weight of her rifle was still fresh in her muscle memory as she maintained eye contact with the gang leader. The store's interior had taken on a new aspect, no longer just a familiar shopping space, but a potential combat zone. Her mind automatically calculated angles, noted cover positions, assessed threats. "You've got an interesting way of looking at things," Ghost said, moving closer. His boots scraped against the wooden floor, 3 steps putting him exactly 12 feet from her position. "Military?" Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her mind continued mapping every movement. "Something like that," she replied, her voice carrying the calm of someone who'd made crucial decisions under far more pressure than this. Through the store's windows, Sarah watched the Crimson Riders continue their deployment. Their formation suggested paramilitary training. These weren't just common criminals. The way they established overlapping fields of view, their positioning at key intersections, whoever had trained them understood tactical operations. That made them more dangerous, but also more predictable to someone with her background. Tom Harper's hands shook slightly as he gripped the counter, but his voice remained steady. "We're just a quiet town, folks, not looking for any trouble." Ghost's attention shifted back to the store owner, but Sarah noted how one of his lieutenants maintained watch on her. Smart. They had some training, but training was different from experience, and none of them had spent years perfecting their craft in the world's most hostile environments. "Quiet towns need protection these days," Ghost replied, his voice carrying practiced menace. "Way we see it, we're offering a service. Insurance, you might say." His hand brushed back his leather. Cut again, a calculated movement meant to display his holstered weapon. Sarah observed the pistol's make and model, noting its condition and likely modifications. The other gang members carried similar hardware, quality equipment, professionally maintained. Outside, more Crimson Riders arrived, their engines echoing. Off the mountain walls, Sarah's mental count reached 32, a significant force for a town this size. Through the window, she watched them begin photographing buildings, documenting security cameras and entry points. Their methodology was systematic, suggesting this wasn't their first town takeover. "Insurance is usually optional," Sarah commented, her voice carrying just enough edge to draw Ghost's attention back to her, this feeling more like a hostile takeover. The gang leader's eyes narrowed as he studied her with new intensity. Something in her stance, her calm assessment of the situation, had triggered his combat instincts. "Good," let him wonder. "Lady," he said softly, "hostile is what happens when folks don't understand their situation. Right now, this is just a business proposition." But Sarah heard the subtle shift in his voice, saw the minor changes in his posture. He was reassessing the situation, trying to identify why his instincts were warning him about this seemingly ordinary woman in a mountain town general store. Through the window, Sarah watched more gang members photographing the school. Emma's school? Her daughter would be in math class now, probably struggling with pre-algebra. The familiar protective instinct rose, but Sarah channeled it into cold calculation. These men had made a critical error in target selection, but they didn't know it yet. Soon, they would learn why some of the military's most hardened veterans still spoke of Ghost Eye Mitchell with a mixture of awe and relief that she'd been on their side. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ghost's fingers drummed against the holster of his weapon as he maintained eye contact with Sarah, the rhythmic tapping betraying a growing unease he couldn't quite place. The morning sun, filtering through Valley Ridge General Store's windows, cast strange shadows across his weathered face, highlighting scars that told their own stories of violence. "See, here's how this works," Ghost continued, his voice carrying practiced menace. "We're going to have a town meeting tonight. Every business owner, every property holder, you'll all learn about our new protection arrangement." His gaze shifted briefly to Tom Harper. "Old-timer here's going to help spread the word, aren't you?" But Sarah's attention had shifted to the Crimson Riders outside the school. Through the store's window, she watched them continuing their surveillance, noting how they photographed entry points and security cameras. Her mind calculated distances, wind patterns, potential firing positions, data accumulated through years of combat experience. The mountain winds would be tricky, especially with the seasonal changes affecting air density, but she'd accounted for worse conditions in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, at Pine Valley Middle School, Emma Mitchell sat in her pre-algebra class, unaware of the danger approaching her town. Her long brown braid draped over her shoulder as she concentrated on quadratic equations, her mother's morning note tucked safely in her pencil case. The same determination that marked Sarah's shooting was reflected in Emma's furrowed brow as she worked through complex problems. Back at the store, Ghost's lieutenant, a man whose cut identified him as Razor, moved closer to Sarah. His movement was practiced, tactical, suggesting formal combat training. "Lady seems awful interested in our boys outside," he observed, his voice carrying the clipped tones of former military. Sarah noted how he positioned himself, analyzing his training level, identifying which branch he likely served in. "Just wondering about their photography skills," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same calm she'd maintained during 1,000-yard shots in combat zones. "Seems awful interested in the school." The subtle shift in Ghost's expression confirmed her suspicion. They'd noticed her particular attention to their surveillance of the school. "Got kids in school?" Ghost asked casually, but Sarah recognized the tactical probe behind the question. He was fishing for leverage, looking for pressure points. She'd used similar techniques during interrogations. "Just curious about your choice of surveillance targets," she deflected, but her mind was already calculating new scenarios, factoring in the potential threat to Emma. Outside, more Crimson Riders arrived, bringing their total presence to nearly 40. Their deployment pattern suggested military experience at the small unit level, likely several former service members among their leadership. Sarah's trained eye identified at least 3 with sniper training, judging by their positioning and awareness of line-of-sight angles. Tom Harper's voice shook slightly as he spoke up. "Ghost, you mentioned a town meeting. What time exactly?" The old store owner was trying to take attention away from Sarah, a gesture of protection that touched her even as she recognized its tactical advantage. Let them focus on the seemingly vulnerable older man rather than the lethal weapon standing quietly in their midst. "Sunset," Ghost replied, turning back to Tom. "Town hall, every business owner, every property holder, no exceptions." His hand finally stopped drumming on his holster as he leaned across the counter. "And just to be clear, this isn't a debate, it's an orientation." The threat in his voice was clear, practiced, effective against civilians unaccustomed to violence. Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket, a text from Emma about staying late for math tutoring. The mundane normality of the message contrasted sharply with the tactical situation developing around them. She needed to respond, to maintain normal patterns while preparing countermeasures. Years of combat experience had taught her the importance of appearing unremarkable until the moment of action. "Might have scheduling conflicts," Sarah commented, her voice carrying just enough challenge to draw Ghost's attention back. "Some folks around here have prior commitments." The gang leader's eyes narrowed as he studied her again, combat instincts trying to identify why this woman set off warning signals in his tactical assessment. "Prior commitments get cancelled," Razor interjected, his hand resting casually on his own weapon. "Town's got new priorities now." Sarah noted the way his thumb rested near the retention strap, definitely military trained, probably special operations based on his stance and awareness. Through the window, Sarah watched more gang members establishing observation posts at key intersections. Their positioning was professional, covering major approaches and likely response routes. They'd done this before, probably multiple times, in other small towns, but Pine Valley was different. They just didn't know how different yet. "Priorities," Sarah repeated softly, the word carrying echoes of mission briefings and combat operations. Interesting choice of words. She maintained eye contact with Ghost, letting him see just enough of what lay behind her calm exterior to make him question his assumptions. Sometimes the most effective weapon was uncertainty, making your opponent reconsider their tactical assessment. Outside, the mountain winds began to shift, bringing colder air down from the peaks. Sarah automatically calculated the wind speed and direction, habits ingrained through thousands of hours behind a rifle scope. Soon, these men would learn why some of the military's most hardened veterans still spoke in hushed tones about certain operations, about impossible shots made under impossible conditions by a shooter they never saw. Ghost made a subtle hand signal, and his men began moving toward the door. "Sunset," he repeated firmly. "No exceptions. Time for Pine Valley to learn how things work in today's world." But as they mounted their bikes and roared away, Sarah remained motionless, her mind already formulating plans, calculating angles, preparing for the kind of precise operation that had made her legendary in military circles. Tom waited until the last motorcycle faded before speaking. "Sarah," he said quietly, "those men, they're not just ordinary criminals." Sarah's smile held no warmth as she checked her phone, confirming Emma's location. "No," she agreed softly, "they're not, and neither am I." Sarah Mitchell's boots echoed through the basement shooting range as she moved with practiced efficiency, checking equipment she hadn't needed to use in combat situations since leaving the military. Her personal arsenal remained meticulously maintained, habits ingrained through years of operational readiness. The specialized rifle cases contained weapons that had made history in combat zones across the world, though their records remained classified. Her fingers traced the familiar contours of her primary weapon, a custom-built precision rifle that had accompanied her on missions others claimed were impossible. The scope alone cost more than most people's cars, its advanced targeting system capable of adjustments that seemed to defy physics. But it wasn't the equipment that had made her legendary. It was the innate understanding of how to use it, how to calculate variables others didn't even consider. Above, the sound of Emma arriving home from school echoed through the house. Sarah quickly secured the weapons room, transitioning seamlessly from combat preparation to maternal duties. The duality of her life had become second nature: elite sniper and devoted mother, each role enhancing rather than diminishing the other. Her daughter's safety had become the ultimate mission parameter, one that would never be compromised. "Mom?" Emma's voice carried down the stairs. "Mr. Peterson's giving us extra math homework because some kids were being disruptive." Sarah emerged from the basement, her expression shifting to match the normalcy of after-school conversation. "Want help with it?" "Indeed," she asked, noting how Emma's backpack seemed heavier than usual. Her daughter's long braid had come slightly loose during the day, just like Sarah's used to during long hours in sniper positions. "Maybe later," Emma replied, dropping her backpack by the kitchen table. "Have you seen all the motorcycles in town? Jenny's dad said there's some kind of gang. He closed the hardware store early." Sarah maintained a calm expression while her mind processed the tactical implications. The Crimson Riders were establishing presence, creating an atmosphere of intimidation, standard psychological warfare tactics. The kitchen window offered a clear view of the mountain ridge where she'd established her primary shooting positions. Months ago, having mapped every angle and wind pattern through countless practice sessions. From the highest point, she could cover nearly every major intersection in Pine Valley. The afternoon sun would be behind her, optimal for long-range observation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tom Harper. "They're watching the store, making lists of who comes in, taking photos." This matched her assessment. The Crimson Riders were gathering intelligence, identifying key community members, establishing control through information. But they were also creating patterns, falling into routines that could be exploited by someone with her training. "Mom?" Emma's voice drew Sarah's attention back. "Is everything okay? You've got that look." Her daughter's perception had always been keen, another trait they shared. Sarah smiled, pushing away thoughts of combat calculations. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just thinking about some work projects." The consulting work she did for private security firms provided excellent cover for her continued training and equipment maintenance. A motorcycle engine roared past their house, the sound deliberately aggressive. Sarah noted the timing. They were establishing patrol patterns, marking territory. Through the window, she watched two Crimson Riders pass slowly, taking photos of her property. Their attention concerned her not for herself, but for what it might mean for Emma's safety. "Maybe you should stay at Aunt Claire's for a few days," Sarah suggested carefully, testing the waters. "Visit your cousins in Missoula." Emma's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Mom, what's going on? Is this about those bikers?" The intuition that made Sarah deadly behind a rifle had been inherited by her daughter, manifesting as a sharp awareness of subtle changes. Before Sarah could respond, her secure phone, the one connected to her military contacts, vibrated with an encrypted message. The sender's code name brought back memories of operations in remote mountain ranges, of shots that had changed the course of conflicts. Her former spotter, now working in military intelligence, had information about the Crimson Riders. The message confirmed her worst fears. Ghost and his core team weren't just ordinary criminals, they were former special operations, discharged under questionable circumstances. They'd taken their training and turned it against civilian targets, using military tactics to systematically take over small towns across 3 states. Their operation was sophisticated, well-funded, and backed by organizations that preferred to remain hidden. Sarah's mind automatically began calculating variables: number of hostiles, their training level, likely response patterns. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across Pine Valley as she considered options. She could get Emma to safety, then deal with the threat using the skills that had made her feared in combat zones. But the Crimson Riders' military background complicated things. They would recognize tactical responses, anticipate standard countermeasures. Another motorcycle passed, this one slowing significantly near their driveway. Through the kitchen window, Sarah caught the rider photographing their house again. The sun glinted off his camera lens, reminding her of scope reflections in combat zones. Emma watched the rider too, her young face showing confusion and concern. "Mom," she said quietly, "I don't want to go to Aunt Claire's. Whatever's happening, we face it together." The words echoed Sarah's own philosophy, one forged through years of combat experience. Sometimes the best defense was to hold your position, to protect what mattered most. Her fingers unconsciously traced patterns on the kitchen counter, the same rhythmic movement she used to control breathing during critical shots. The Crimson Riders had made a serious tactical error in targeting Pine Valley, but their biggest mistake was threatening a community that included a mother with her particular set of skills. As twilight approached Pine Valley, Sarah Mitchell made her way to the old mining office on the outskirts of town. The weathered building had been converted into a private shooting club years ago, though few residents knew about its more secure basement level. Here Sarah had established connections with other veterans who'd settled in the mountain community, drawn by its isolation and tight-knit nature. Marcus Reynolds, a former Marine Corps scout sniper, looked up from cleaning his rifle as Sarah entered the basement facility. His dark features showed recognition of the tension in her stance, the familiar alertness of a professional assessing threats. "Saw our new visitors," he said quietly, his hands continuing their practiced maintenance routine, bringing back memories of Kandahar. Sarah moved to the planning table, spreading out a detailed topographical map of Pine Valley and its surrounding. Mountains. They're not just ordinary criminals, she confirmed, her finger tracing key elevations and approaches. Ghost and his core team are former special operations. They're using military tactics to systematize town takeovers. The information caused Marcus to pause his cleaning, his expression hardening with understanding. Through the basement's reinforced windows, they could see more Crimson Riders patrolling the streets, their patterns becoming more organized as they established control points throughout Pine Valley. Sarah had counted 57 members now, with more arriving hourly. Their deployment suggested extensive tactical training, but it also revealed patterns that could be exploited by someone with proper training. Called in some markers, Sarah continued, her voice carrying the calm authority that had steadied sniper teams in combat zones. Got intel from my old network. Ghost, real name James Carter, served with Delta Force. Most of his leadership team comes from similar backgrounds. They're using their training to create a sophisticated criminal enterprise, targeting isolated communities with strategic value. Marcus nodded, recognition flickering across his features. Pine Valley's location controls the only viable transport route through this section of mountains, perfect for moving goods without oversight. His assessment matched Sarah's. The town's isolation, once its protection, now made it a valuable target for organized crime. Sarah's secure phone vibrated with new messages. Her former spotter had activated old networks, reaching out to veterans who understood the true significance of her combat record. Got people coming in, she reported, checking encrypted coordinates. Former operators who've worked with me before. They know what we're dealing with. The basement door opened as Michael Chen entered, his quiet movements reflecting his background. In Army Special Forces, he'd settled in Pine Valley 2 years ago, opening a small computer repair shop that provided cover for his continued work in cybersecurity. Got into their communications, he reported without preamble. They're using encrypted channels, military-grade protocols, but I recognize the patterns, similar to what we saw in Baghdad. Sarah spread additional satellite images across the planning table, her mind automatically calculating fields of fire and optimal positioning. They're establishing a command center at the old lumber mill, she noted, marking key positions. Good tactical choice, clear lines of sight, multiple escape routes, but it also makes them predictable to anyone with proper training. Through the basement's security monitors, they watched more Crimson Riders conducting reconnaissance throughout town. Their professionalism was evident in their movement patterns, their attention to detail. But Sarah had spent years studying exactly this kind of tactical deployment, learning how to counter it from distances their operators would consider impossible. "Town meeting at sunset," Marcus commented, his tone carrying combat-earned wisdom. "Classic psychological warfare. Gather everyone in one place, demonstrate force, establish dominance through fear." Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing potential sniper positions on the topographical map. They're expecting resistance at some point, but they're looking for conventional responses, standard countermeasures. Michael's laptop displayed intercepted communications, revealing the extent of the Crimson Riders' operation. "They've done this before," he reported grimly. 6 other towns across 3 states. They start with intimidation, escalate to direct control of local government, eventually establish complete dominance of transportation routes. Sarah's mind calculated variables, factoring in approaching weather patterns and changing light conditions. The mountains complicated long-range shooting, but she'd trained specifically for these conditions, understanding wind patterns and air density variations that would challenge less experienced operators. "Got confirmation," she announced, checking. Another encrypted message, 3 more teams incoming. Veterans who've worked with me in combat zones, they'll approach through backcountry, avoid main roads. The arrival of experienced operators would change the tactical dynamics, but Sarah knew the real advantage lay in the Crimson Riders' fundamental miscalculation. They'd assumed Pine Valley was defenseless, never considering that it might harbor someone with her particular capabilities. Marcus moved to the weapons locker, his movements reflecting years of combat experience. They'll have spotters on high ground, he noted, selecting specific equipment. Former special operations don't leave angles uncovered. Sarah's slight smile carried echoes of impossible shots in combat zones. High ground's already covered, she replied quietly. Been training for these exact conditions since moving here. Every angle, every wind pattern, every possible position. The sun continued its descent toward the mountain peaks as more veterans arrived at the old mining office. Each brought specialized skills earned in combat zones across the world, but all recognized the unique advantage of having someone with Sarah's specific expertise. The Crimson Riders had chosen Pine Valley believing its isolation made it vulnerable. They were about to learn why some of the military's most hardened veterans still spoke in whispers about the shooter they called Ghost Eye Mitchell. Through the basement's reinforced windows, they watched the Crimson Riders continue their preparations for the town meeting. Their tactical precision was impressive, their deployment professional and methodical, but they had made a crucial error in target selection, one that would prove fatal to their operation. They had threatened a community protected by a mother who had redefined what was possible in long-range combat operations. The sunset gathering at Pine Valley's town hall proceeded exactly as Sarah had anticipated, with the Crimson Riders establishing a sophisticated security perimeter that reflected their military training. Ghost stood at the podium, his presence commanding attention as concerned citizens filled the wooden benches. From her position near the rear exit, Sarah noted 32 gang members inside the building, with at least 20 more maintaining external security. Through discreet earpieces, she maintained communication with her newly assembled team. Marcus had established observation posts in pre-selected locations, while Michael monitored the Crimson Riders' encrypted communications from the old mining office. The veterans Sarah had called in were already in position, their presence unknown to Ghost's security teams. As I explained earlier, Ghost addressed the assembled townspeople, his voice carrying practiced authority. Pine Valley needs protection in these uncertain times. We're offering a comprehensive security service, mandatory participation. His eyes swept the crowd, lingering briefly on Sarah. The monthly fee structure is non-negotiable. Sarah observed the mounting tension in the room. Tom Harper sat, rigid in his seat, while other business owners exchanged worried glances. The Crimson Riders had positioned their most intimidating members strategically throughout the hall, their weapons visible beneath leather cuts. Classic psychological warfare, executed with military precision. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Marcus's voice came through Sarah's earpiece. Heavy engines, probably reinforcements. She acknowledged with a subtle hand signal, her mind already calculating how the additional forces would affect tactical dynamics. The growing darkness outside worked to their advantage, particularly given her expertise in low-light operations. Ghost continued detailing his protection requirements, but Sarah's attention had shifted to the subtle changes in his security team's positioning. They were responding to something in their own communications, likely reports of movement in the surrounding mountains. Their training was showing in their professional response, but it also made them predictable to someone who understood their protocols. "Sir," one of Ghost's lieutenants approached the podium, speaking in hushed tones. The gang leader's expression remained neutral, but Sarah recognized the subtle signs of tension. Their perimeter teams had detected something, though not the full extent of the veterans' deployment. Through her earpiece, she heard Michael reporting increased encryption activity in their communications. "Let's take a brief recess," Ghost announced, his casual tone belying the tactical adjustments being implemented. "Everyone stay seated. We'll resume shortly." He moved to confer with his security team, their positioning shifting to cover potential threats. They were good, their training evident in every movement, but they were operating on outdated assumptions about their tactical superiority. Sarah maintained her relaxed posture while monitoring all angles of approach. The Crimson Riders were establishing a tighter security cordon, their movements reflecting standard counter-insurgency protocols. But they hadn't identified the real threat, a shooter whose combat records remained classified, whose capabilities exceeded normal tactical expectations. "External teams are getting nervous," Michael's voice reported through the earpiece. "They're detecting movement, but can't confirm positions, switching to secondary encryption protocols." Sarah allowed herself a slight smile. The veterans she'd called in were deliberately creating uncertainty, using the Crimson Riders' own tactical training against them. Ghost returned to the podium, his composure maintained despite the growing tension. "Seems we have some uninvited guests in our mountains," he announced, his voice carrying an edge of menace. "Anyone want to share information about local hunting clubs or shooting organizations?" His gaze fixed on Sarah, combat instincts finally identifying her as a potential threat. The moment stretched, filled with tactical calculations and unspoken challenges. Sarah met his stare evenly, letting him see just enough of her capabilities to create doubt. In the growing darkness outside, her veterans continued their strategic deployment, implementing plans developed through years of combat experience. "There's an old saying in the special operations community," Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had steadied sniper teams in combat zones. "Assumption is the mother of all mistakes." The shift in Ghost's expression confirmed her assessment. He recognized the phraseology, understood its implications. The Crimson Riders' security teams moved with increased urgency, responding to multiple reports of movement in the surrounding mountains. Their professional training was evident in their coordinated response, but it also revealed their growing uncertainty. They were accustomed to being the superior force, the ones with tactical advantage. "Lady," Ghost replied softly, his hand resting casually near his weapon, "you seem to know some interesting phrases. Care to share your background?" The tension in the town hall mounted as citizens recognized the dangerous undercurrents in the exchange. Sarah maintained her calm demeanor, even as her mind calculated firing solutions and response scenarios. "Could share my call sign," she offered, noting how Ghost's security team had shifted to cover multiple angles. "But then you'd have to explain to your men why they should be very, very concerned about having Ghost Eye Mitchell in their area of operations." The effect was immediate. Several of the Crimson Riders' military-trained members reacted to the name, their tactical positioning faltering momentarily. Ghost's composed facade cracked slightly as recognition set in. That call sign carried significant weight in special operations circles, associated with shots that had seemed impossible, with operations that had changed the course of conflicts. "You're supposed to be a myth," he said quietly, reassessing the tactical situation with new understanding. "Myths don't have daughters in math class," Sarah replied, her tone carrying deadly promise. "Myths don't take issue with threats to their community." Through her earpiece, she heard her veterans reporting ready status, positioned to demonstrate exactly why she had earned her reputation in combat zones across the world. The Crimson Riders had arrived in Pine Valley confident in their tactical superiority, their military training giving them an edge over ordinary civilians. But they had unknowingly targeted a community protected by someone who had redefined what was possible in combat operations. someone whose capabilities exceeded even special operations parameters. Their first major confrontation was about to teach them the cost of that miscalculation. The atmosphere in Pine Valley's town hall shifted palpably as the implications of Sarah's identity registered among the Crimson Riders' leadership. Ghost maintained his position at the podium, but his security teams had adopted more defensive formations, their movements reflecting new tactical considerations. Through her earpiece, Sarah heard Marcus reporting increased activity around the gang's command center at the old lumber mill. "Your reputation precedes you," Ghost acknowledged, his voice carrying carefully measured respect. "But this isn't a combat zone. Different rules apply here." The statement caused Sarah to arch an eyebrow slightly, her posture remaining relaxed despite the mounting tension. Around them, townspeople watched the exchange with growing understanding. Something significant had shifted in the power dynamic. "That's where you're wrong," Sarah replied, her tone carrying the same calm precision she'd maintained during crucial shots in military operations. "The moment you threatened this community, you made it a combat zone. The moment you photographed my daughter's school, you established mission parameters." The emphasis on these points caused several of Ghost's military-trained lieutenants to exchange concerned glances. Through the town hall's windows, Sarah noted the arrival of more motorcycles, reinforcements responding to the growing uncertainty in the Crimson Riders' tactical assessment. Michael's voice in her earpiece confirmed increased encryption activity in their communications as they attempted to verify her identity and capabilities. Tom Harper stood slowly from his seat, his weathered face showing new determination. "Think, we've heard enough about your protection fees," he announced, addressing Ghost directly. "Seems to me Pine Valley's already got all the protection it needs." Other business owners began rising as well, the presence of Sarah's capabilities giving them courage to resist. Ghost's security teams responded to the changing situation with professional efficiency, adjusting their positions to maintain tactical advantage. But Sarah noted the uncertainty in their movements. They were trained for overwhelming force against civilian targets, not for confronting someone whose combat record had become legend in special operations circles. "Got movement at the lumber mill," Marcus reported through the earpiece. "They're mobilizing additional forces, establishing defensive positions." Sarah acknowledged the information with a subtle gesture, her mind already calculating how the Crimson Riders' military training would influence their response patterns. "Perhaps," Ghost suggested, his tone remaining diplomatic despite the tension, "we should continue this discussion in private, professional courtesy between operators." The offer carried multiple layers, an attempt to separate Sarah from the townspeople, to negotiate from what he perceived as a position of numerical superiority. Sarah's slight smile held no warmth. "Counteroffer," she replied, her voice pitched to carry throughout the hall. "You have 2 hours to evacuate your forces from Pine Valley. After that, I demonstrate exactly why certain shots in combat zones were classified above your clearance level." The statement caused immediate reaction among Ghost's military-trained members, their tactical positioning becoming more defensive. Through her earpiece, Michael reported increased activity in the Crimson Riders' encrypted channels. "They're requesting information about your combat record," he noted with professional satisfaction, getting nervous responses from their contacts. The gang's leadership was beginning to understand the full implications of their tactical error. In target selection, Jenny Peterson's father, owner of the hardware store, spoke up from his position near the front. "Think we're done here," he announced firmly. "Meeting's over." Around him, other business owners and property holders began moving toward the exits, their fear replaced by growing confidence. The Crimson Riders' security teams maintained their positions but did not prevent the departure, a clear sign that Ghost was reassessing his strategic options. "Lady, you're good," Ghost acknowledged quietly as the hall emptied. Probably the best, but I've got nearly 60 trained operators out there. Numbers matter. Sarah met his gaze steadily, letting him see the absolute certainty in her expression. Numbers mattered in Damascus too, she replied softly, until they didn't. Ask your contacts about that operation, if they've got clearance to know about it. The reference caused Ghost to pale slightly. That particular operation had become whispered legend in special operations circles. Impossible shots made at distances that defied tactical doctrine, an entire enemy command structure eliminated by a shooter who seemed to transcend normal combat. Limitations. Outside the town hall, Sarah's veterans continued their strategic positioning, implementing plans developed through years of combat experience. The mountain winds were picking up, carrying the first hints of approaching weather, conditions that would challenge normal shooting parameters, but which Sarah had trained specifically to exploit. "Your call, Ghost," Sarah stated clearly, moving toward the exit with measured confidence. 2 hours. After that, I start demonstrating why certain combat records remain classified. The threat carried absolute conviction, backed by a reputation that even hardened special operations veterans treated with wary respect. Through her earpiece, Marcus reported increased activity around the Crimson Riders' positions. "They're starting to look nervous," he observed, with professional satisfaction. "Their tactical formations are getting sloppy." Sarah acknowledged the information while maintaining eye contact with Ghost, letting him read the deadly promise in her expression. The transformation in Pine Valley's atmosphere was palpable as citizens departed the town hall. Where fear had dominated hours before, a new sense of confidence emerged. The community had discovered it harbored not just any protector, but someone whose capabilities exceeded even special operations parameters. Someone whose reputation alone could cause hardened combat veterans to reconsider their tactical assessments. Ghost watched Sarah leave, his composed facade showing cracks as he confronted the full implications of his strategic error. The Crimson Riders had chosen Pine Valley, believing their military training made them invincible against civilian targets. They were about to learn why certain combat operations remained classified, why some capabilities exceeded normal tactical expectations. The night ahead would demonstrate exactly why Sarah Mitchell's reputation caused even special operations veterans to speak in whispers. The 2-hour deadline Sarah had given the Crimson Riders transformed Pine Valley into a landscape of tactical calculations and strategic repositioning. From her established observation post high in the mountains, she monitored the increasing activity around the old lumber mill through her specialized scope. Ghost's forces were implementing defensive protocols that reflected their military background, but their movements also revealed growing uncertainty. Confirming increased activity at all their checkpoints, Marcus reported through their secure communication channel. They're reinforcing positions, but their formations are showing gaps, disciplines starting to crack. Sarah acknowledged the information while continuing her observation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley, creating optimal conditions for the kind of precision shooting that had made her legendary in combat zones. Through her scope, she observed Ghost conferring with his leadership team outside the lumber mill. Their body language suggested intense disagreement, the kind that emerged when trained operators confronted threats that exceeded their tactical experience. Michael's voice came through her earpiece, providing additional context. Intercepted communications indicate internal conflict. Some of their military-trained members are advocating immediate withdrawal. Ghost's reputation in special operations circles is working against him. Sarah adjusted her scope settings to account for the changing atmospheric conditions. The mountain winds were picking up, creating variable patterns that would challenge normal shooting parameters. But she had spent months practicing in these exact conditions, understanding wind flows and air density variations that would confound less experienced operators. At the valley floor, Pine Valley underwent its own transformation. Where citizens had previously hurried through streets with downcast eyes, they now moved with renewed confidence. The hardware store reopened its doors, with Jenny Peterson's father standing defiantly in the entrance. Other businesses followed suit, their owners, emboldened by the presence of Sarah's capabilities and the growing uncertainty in the Crimson Riders' ranks. Movement at the school, Marcus reported suddenly. 4 vehicles, military precision. Sarah's scope swung immediately to monitor the approach to Pine Valley Middle School. Through the magnified view, she identified Ghost himself, leading a team toward the building where Emma attended classes. The implied threat was clear, an attempt to regain tactical advantage by establishing leverage. "Wrong move," Sarah stated quietly, her tone carrying the same deadly calm that had steadied her through countless combat operations. Her finger rested naturally against her rifle's trigger as she calculated wind variables and elevation adjustments. "Michael, initiate Operation Checkmate." The coded instruction activated a pre-planned sequence of coordinated actions by her veteran team. Within moments, Ghost's advance toward the school was interrupted by a precise demonstration of Sarah's capabilities. Her first shot, a carefully calculated warning, impacted the ground exactly 6 inches in front of his lead vehicle. The precision of the shot, coming from a distance his trained operators had considered beyond practical range, caused immediate reaction in their tactical formation. "That's a 2-mile shot," one of Ghost's lieutenants could be heard saying through their monitored communications. "Through variable mountain winds, nobody makes that shot." But Sarah was already adjusting her scope for a second demonstration, compensating for wind patterns that seemed to defy conventional ballistic calculations. Her second shot removed the driver's side mirror from Ghost's vehicle with surgical precision, the sound of the impact reaching them long after the shot itself. The message was clear: if she could hit such a small target at this range, under these conditions, no position in the valley was secure against her capabilities. Through her scope, Sarah watched the Crimson Riders' tactical discipline deteriorate further. Their military training told them they should be safe at this distance, that no shooter could consistently engage targets through such complex environmental conditions. But Sarah had built her reputation by redefining what was possible in long-range combat operations. "Boss, this is suicide," one of Ghost's military-trained officers transmitted on their encrypted channel, which Michael monitored. "That's Ghost I. Mitchell out there. The shots she made in Damascus. We're not equipped for this level of operation." The reference to her classified operations carried significant weight among special operations veterans who understood the true implications of her capabilities. Sarah maintained her shooting position, her breathing controlled and steady as she continued monitoring the Crimson Riders' movements. Their defensive formations had become increasingly erratic, reflecting the psychological impact of facing a threat that exceeded their tactical experience. Through her scope, she observed more internal arguments among their leadership, their military disciplines strained by confronting capabilities they had considered mythical. "Multiple vehicles preparing for movement at the lumber mill," Marcus reported. "Looks like some of them are packing up." Sarah acknowledged the information while maintaining her focus on Ghost's position near the school. The gang leader's tactical experience would be warring with his pride, forcing him to confront the reality of his strategic error in targeting Pine Valley. Through their monitored communications, Ghost's voice carried barely controlled frustration. "Fall back to defensive positions. All units implement Protocol Echo." The coded instruction represented a significant shift in their tactical approach, moving from offensive operations to defensive posture. Sarah allowed herself a slight smile, recognizing the implications of this tactical retreat. The sun continued its descent toward the mountain peaks as Pine Valley witnessed the first cracks in the Crimson Riders' perceived invincibility. Their military training had made them effective against ordinary civilian targets, but they now faced someone whose capabilities transcended normal tactical parameters. The night ahead would demonstrate why certain combat records remained classified, why some reputations caused even hardened veterans to reconsider their strategic assessments. The mountain dusk brought new complications to the tactical situation in Pine Valley. Sarah's scope captured movement patterns that didn't match the Crimson Riders' established protocols, new vehicles entering the valley with military precision that exceeded even Ghost's standards. Through her secured communication channel, Michael's voice carried professional concern, intercepting encrypted transmissions on frequencies we haven't seen before, he reported. More sophisticated than the Crimson Riders' standard communications, these are military-grade protocols. Sarah adjusted her scope settings, tracking the new arrivals as they established positions around the lumber mill with practiced efficiency. Marcus's voice added crucial intelligence. 4 black SUVs approaching from the North Access Road. Professional drivers maintaining tactical spacing. This isn't regular gang reinforcement. Sarah observed the vehicles through her scope, noting details that confirmed her growing assessment. The new arrivals moved with the coordinated precision that marked elite private military contractors. Through their monitored communications, Ghost's voice revealed unexpected tension. "Sir, we didn't anticipate this level of resistance. The situation is more complicated than our initial intelligence suggested." The response came through on an encrypted channel that even Michael struggled to intercept. "Your failure to properly assess the target location is noted, Mr. Carter. Aegis Securities is assuming operational control." Sarah's breath caught slightly at the mention of Aegis Securities. The private military corporation had connections to classified operations she'd encountered during her military career, operations that remained redacted even at the highest levels. Their presence transformed the tactical situation from a simple gang intimidation to something far more complex. "Emma's secure?" Sarah questioned through her command channel, maintaining her observation of the new forces deploying throughout the valley. Marcus's response was immediate. "Affirmative. Claire has her safely out of the area. All civilian evacuation protocols are in effect." The confirmation allowed Sarah to focus fully on the evolving tactical situation. Through her scope, she watched a figure emerge from the lead SUV. Tall, distinguished, wearing a tailored suit that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. Colonel James Richardson, former Special Operations Command, now Aegis Securities Chief of Operations. His presence at a relatively small-scale operation indicated significantly higher stakes than mere territorial expansion. "Michael, access the secured database," Sarah instructed, her mind calculating new variables as Richardson's security team established a professional perimeter. "Cross-reference Aegis Securities with any unusual land purchases or development proposals in the region." The sound of rapid typing came through her earpiece as Michael implemented her request. "Multiple shell companies," he reported after several tense moments. "They've been quietly acquiring property rights throughout the mountain range. Pine Valley sits at a crucial junction for their planned operations." The intelligence confirmed Sarah's tactical assessment. This was about more than simple criminal territory. Strategic interests were at play. Richardson's voice came through their monitored communications with cold precision. "Ghost Eye Mitchell's presence changes the operational parameters. Her capabilities exceed standard tactical responses." The colonel's awareness of her identity and reputation added another layer of complexity to the situation. Unlike Ghost, Richardson had the clearance to know exactly why certain combat operations remained classified. Sarah maintained her shooting position as darkness approached, watching. Aegis Security's professional operators systematically replaced the Crimson Riders' forces at key tactical positions. Their deployment reflected highest-level military training, establishing interlocking fields of fire that would challenge even her exceptional capabilities. "Sir!" Ghost's voice carried barely controlled frustration through the communications network. "My men can handle one shooter regardless of reputation." Richardson's response was immediate and final. "Your men are no longer relevant to this operation, Mr. Carter. Aegis Securities will handle the Mitchell situation appropriately." Through her scope, Sarah observed the Crimson Riders being efficiently displaced from their positions, their military training insufficient against Aegis's superior tactical protocols. The private military contractors moved with the coordinated precision that marked extensive combat experience, establishing defensive positions that respected her long-range capabilities. Getting additional movement on the eastern approach, Marcus reported, "Heavy vehicles, probably additional Aegis resources." Sarah acknowledged the information while calculating new firing solutions that accounted for the professional opposition. Richardson's operators wouldn't make the same mistakes as Ghost's forces. They understood exactly what she was capable of. Michael's voice added crucial context. Accessing more data on Aegis's regional operations, they're establishing a private security corridor through the mountain range. Pine Valley's location makes it essential to their plans. The intelligence explained the escalation from gang intimidation to professional military response. The stakes had risen far beyond simple territorial control. As night settled over Pine Valley, Sarah observed Richardson conducting a professional assessment of the tactical situation. Unlike Ghost's brutal intimidation, Aegis Securities operated with corporate precision and military expertise. Their presence transformed the conflict from a straightforward defensive community into a complex operation against professional operators who understood her capabilities. The mountain winds carried the sound of heavy equipment being moved into position as Aegis Securities established their command center. Sarah's reputation had forced them to commit significant resources, bringing in operators whose training matched or exceeded her own. The night ahead would require all the skills that had made her legendary in combat zones, facing opponents who understood exactly why certain operations remained classified. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched Richardson deploy his forces with tactical precision that acknowledged her capabilities while preparing to counter them. The arrival of Aegis Securities had elevated the conflict to a level that few outside special operations would understand. The defense of Pine Valley would now require every bit of skill and experience that had earned her the whispered reputation of Ghost Eye Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell analyzed the transformed tactical situation through her specialized scope, watching Aegis Securities deploy their professional operators with precision that demonstrated their elite training. Colonel Richardson had established a sophisticated command and control center at the lumber mill, implementing protocols that reflected his extensive special operations background. Multiple teams establishing elevated positions, Marcus reported through their secure channel. These aren't ordinary contractors. They're moving like Tier 1 operators. Sarah acknowledged the assessment while calculating new variables. Richardson's forces understood the complexities of long-range precision shooting, working to deny her the advantages that had neutralized the Crimson Riders. Through their monitored communications, Richardson's voice carried calm authority. "All units implement Protocol Sierra. We're dealing with a shooter who redefined engagement parameters in multiple combat zones. Standard tactical responses will not suffice. The colonel's understanding of her capabilities necessitated a more sophisticated strategic response. Michael's voice added crucial intelligence through their command channel. Accessing Aegis's tactical database, they're deploying their Echo teams, specialized counter-sniper units with extensive high-altitude experience. Sarah had encountered similar units during classified operations, recognizing the elevated threat level they represented. These operators understood the complexities of long-range precision shooting in mountainous terrain. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, compensating for changing wind patterns as night settled over Pine Valley. Through her scope, she observed Aegis's professional operators establishing interlocking fields of fire that respected her capabilities while working to minimize her tactical advantages. Their deployment patterns suggested extensive familiarity with her documented operations. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted, "thermal imaging systems are encountering interference from the mountain terrain. Temperature variations are creating false readings." The colonel's response was immediate. Ghost I. Mitchell wrote the book on defeating thermal detection in variable conditions. Implement alternative acquisition protocols. Sarah allowed herself a slight smile at the reference. Her techniques for defeating advanced detection systems had become standard training material in special operations courses, though few operators had successfully replicated her results. Richardson's forces would be implementing countermeasures based on her own documented methods. "Movement at the valley's eastern approach," Marcus reported suddenly. "Two vehicles matching military transport profiles. They're bringing in specialized equipment." Sarah's scope confirmed the assessment, identifying the distinctive outline of advanced counter-sniper systems being positioned with professional precision. Michael's voice carried additional context. "Intercepting requisition orders. They're deploying Atlas systems, cutting-edge ballistic tracking technology designed specifically for extreme long-range interdiction." The information caused Sarah to recalculate her tactical options. Atlas systems were theoretically capable of predicting shot trajectories by analyzing environmental variables. "Interesting choice," Sarah transmitted to her team. "But Atlas systems struggle with complex mountain wind patterns. Their algorithms can't account for micro-variations in air density at extreme ranges." Her extensive experience in mountain warfare had revealed limitations in even the most advanced targeting systems. Through her scope, Sarah observed Richardson personally directing the deployment of his counter-sniper teams. The colonel understood her capabilities well enough to know that standard tactical responses would prove insufficient. His operators moved with practiced efficiency, establishing positions that would challenge even her exceptional skills. Additional encryption detected in their communications, Michael reported. "They're implementing quantum-resistant protocols. These aren't standard private military contractor resources." The level of technological sophistication confirmed the strategic importance of Pine Valley to Aegis's regional operations. Sarah maintained her observation as darkness deepened, watching Richardson's forces establish a professional security cordon that acknowledged her capabilities while preparing to counter them. Unlike Ghost's brutal intimidation tactics, Aegis Securities operated with corporate precision, backed by military expertise. "Marcus, implement contingency Delta," Sarah instructed, her mind calculating new variables as Richardson's counter-sniper teams settled into their positions. The coded command activated pre-planned responses to professional opposition, utilizing tactics she had developed during classified operations. Through their monitored channels, Richardson's voice remained calm but carried underlying tension. "All units be advised. Target has extensive experience defeating conventional counter-sniper protocols. Maintain maximum operational security." The colonel's respect for her capabilities influenced every aspect of his tactical deployment. Sarah adjusted her scope settings to account for the deteriorating light conditions, noting how Aegis's operators had positioned themselves to minimize exposure to her documented shooting patterns. Their defensive formations reflected intimate knowledge of her combat record, implementing countermeasures based on analyzed data from her classified operations. Additional movement at the command center, Marcus reported. They're establishing redundant communication networks hardened against interference. The professional thoroughness of Aegis's deployment demonstrated the resources they were willing to commit to securing Pine Valley. The mountain winds shifted again, carrying the sound of sophisticated equipment being calibrated as Richardson's forces prepared for extended operations. Sarah's reputation had forced them to commit significant technological resources, bringing in systems designed specifically to counter her exceptional capabilities. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched the colonel methodically implement layers of security that respected her abilities while working to neutralize them. The arrival of Aegis securities had elevated the conflict to a level that few outside special operations would comprehend. Defending Pine Valley would now require every bit of skill and experience that had earned her the whispered reputation of Ghost Eye Mitchell. The transformation of Pine Valley's tactical situation continued as Sarah observed Aegis securities establishing their sophisticated defensive network. Through her specialized scope, she watched Colonel Richardson implementing protocols that demonstrated his intimate understanding of her capabilities, while in the town below, a different kind of strength began to emerge. Multiple civilian movements detected, Marcus reported through their secure channel, coordinated patterns suggesting organized response. Sarah adjusted her scope, observing as Pine Valley's citizens implemented strategies they had discreetly practiced over the previous months. Tom Harper's general store had become an impromptu command center for civilian operations, coordinating community responses with unexpected precision. Through their monitored communications, Richardson's voice carried professional concern. Be advised, civilian population is displaying unusual tactical awareness. Their movements suggest prior preparation. The colonel's assessment confirmed what Sarah had carefully cultivated since arriving in Pine Valley, a community prepared to defend itself. Michael's voice added crucial intelligence. Intercepting Aegis's analytical updates, they're noting systematic civilian interference with their deployment, non-violent but highly coordinated. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, recognizing the effectiveness of the emergency protocols she had helped establish throughout the community. From her elevated position, Sarah observed Jenny Peterson's father coordinating with other business owners, implementing defensive measures that complicated Aegis's attempts to establish control. The hardware store owner had been one of the first to embrace Sarah's suggested preparations, understanding the importance of community resilience. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted, "civilian population is demonstrating unexpected resistance. Their responses appear professionally structured." The colonel's reply reflected growing comprehension. Ghost Eye Mitchell's influence extends beyond direct tactical operations. The entire community has been prepared for this scenario. Sarah maintained her observation as Pine Valley's citizens executed coordinated responses that reflected months of careful planning. Each business owner, each community leader, had been discreetly trained in specific protocols designed to complicate professional military operations while maintaining plausible deniability. Additional civilian movements on the western approach, Marcus reported. They're implementing the supply chain protocols. Sarah's scope confirmed the assessment, watching as carefully prepared distribution networks activated, ensuring essential resources remained available despite Aegis's attempts at control. Michael's voice carried additional context. analyzing Aegis's response patterns. Their professional operators are struggling to counter civilian resistance without escalating force. Their rules of engagement are restricting tactical options. The information confirmed Sarah's strategic assessment. Even elite military contractors were constrained when facing coordinated civilian opposition. Through her scope, Sarah observed Richardson personally assessing the civilian response patterns, his expression revealing growing recognition of the tactical complexity he faced. The colonel's extensive special operations experience helped him understand that he confronted not just a legendary sniper, but an entire community prepared to resist. All units maintain discipline, Richardson transmitted to his forces. Civilian population has been tactically prepared by a Tier 1 operator. Treat all interactions as potentially significant. The colonel's respect for Sarah's capabilities now extended to the entire community she had helped prepare. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, continuing to monitor both Aegis's professional operators and the civilian response patterns below. Tom Harper's voice came through their secure channel, reporting from the improvised civilian command center. All business sectors implementing prepared protocols, community response networks fully activated. The mountain winds carried the sound of coordinated civilian activity as Pine Valley demonstrated its prepared resilience. Sarah had spent months quietly training key community members, ensuring each understood their role in resisting professional military operations. Now, that preparation manifested in ways that challenged even Aegis's sophisticated tactical approach. Remarkable preparation. Richardson's voice carried genuine appreciation. Through their monitored channels, she's transformed the entire civilian population into a coordinated resistance network without compromising operational security. The colonel's assessment reflected his professional understanding of the tactical achievement this represented. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched Pine Valley's citizens continue implementing defensive measures that complicated Aegis's attempt to establish control. Each community member understood their role, executing prepared responses that demonstrated unexpected tactical sophistication while maintaining normal civilian appearances. Additional civilian coordination detected, Marcus reported. They're implementing the secondary response protocols. Sarah acknowledged the information, recognizing that Pine Valley's resistance had progressed beyond initial defensive measures into more sophisticated, coordinated operations. The transformation of Pine Valley from vulnerable mountain community to prepared resistance network represented Sarah's most significant tactical achievement. Beyond her legendary shooting capabilities, beyond her combat record, she had created something that even elite military contractors struggled to counter. A civilian population trained to resist professional military operations while maintaining plausible deniability. As night settled over the valley, Sarah observed the continuing interaction between Aegis's professional operators and Pine Valley's prepared civilian population. Colonel Richardson had committed significant military resources to securing the town, but now faced resistance that transcended conventional tactical responses. The defense of Pine Valley would demonstrate that true strength emerged not just from individual capability, but from community unity prepared with professional precision. The tactical situation in Pine Valley reached a critical turning point, as Sarah's specialized scope captured new movement at Aegis Security's command center. Colonel Richardson was engaging in an encrypted video conference, his professional demeanor reflecting the gravity of the discussion. Through their sophisticated surveillance systems, Michael managed to intercept fragments of the transmission. "Situation is more complex than anticipated," Richardson reported to an unseen figure. Target location has been systematically prepared for resistance. Ghost Eye Mitchell's influence extends beyond direct tactical considerations. The response came through with corporate precision. The Meridian Group's board requires immediate resolution. The Mountain Corridor project cannot be delayed. Sarah's breath caught slightly at the mention of the Meridian Group. Through their secure channel, she instructed Michael, access all available data on Meridian Group holdings. Focus on regional infrastructure development. The sound of rapid analysis followed as her intelligence specialist implemented the request. Extensive corporate network detected, Michael reported moments later. Meridian Group operates through multiple shell companies, specializing in private infrastructure development. They've been systematically acquiring control of strategic mountain transportation routes. The intelligence confirmed Sarah's growing assessment. Aegis Securities was merely the enforcement arm of a larger corporate enterprise. Through her scope, Sarah observed Richardson concluding his video conference, his expression revealing new urgency. All units implement Protocol Omega, he transmitted to his forces. Meridian Group has authorized expanded operational parameters. Civilian resistance must be neutralized within 24 hours. Marcus's voice added crucial intelligence. Multiple corporate vehicles approaching from the Eastern Access Road, private security contractors, different from Aegis's standard operators. Sarah's scope confirmed the assessment, identifying the distinctive profile of executive protection teams often employed by major corporations. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted, receiving confirmation of Meridian Group executive arrival, Mr. Alexander Chen, Chief Strategic Officer, incoming with full security detail. The Colonel's response carried professional tension. Acknowledged, all units maintain maximum security protocols. Ghost Eye Mitchell's capabilities remain our primary tactical concern. Sarah maintained her observation as a sleek corporate. Helicopter approached the lumber mill's landing zone. Through their secure channel, Michael provided context. Alexander Chen, former intelligence operative, now heads Meridian Group's strategic operations. His presence indicates significant corporate investment in the region. The helicopter's arrival transformed the tactical environment as corporate executives joined military contractors in the command center. Through their surveillance systems, Sarah observed the interaction between Chen and Richardson, noting the subtle power dynamics at play. "Colonel?" Chen's voice carried corporate authority through their monitored channels. "Your tactical reports indicate unnecessary delays. The Meridian Group's investment in this transportation corridor cannot be compromised by local resistance." Richardson's response reflected professional caution. "Sir, we're dealing with an operator whose capabilities exceed normal tactical parameters. Ghost Eye Mitchell's presence requires careful consideration." Sarah adjusted her scope settings, studying Chen's security detail as they established additional protective measures around the command center. Unlike Aegis's military contractors, these operators specialized in corporate protection, adding another layer of complexity to the tactical situation. Additional data on Meridian Group operations, Michael reported through their secure channel. They're establishing private transportation networks across multiple states, using shell companies to avoid regulatory oversight. Pine Valley's location makes it crucial to their regional strategy. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched the corporate and military elements integrate their operations, creating a sophisticated response to Pine Valley's resistance. Chen's arrival had elevated the conflict beyond tactical considerations into strategic corporate interests. "All units be advised," Richardson transmitted to his forces. "Meridian Group has authorized additional resources. Corporate security teams will augment our tactical operations. The colonel's announcement reflected the escalating nature of the conflict as corporate power joined military expertise in attempting to secure Pine Valley. Sarah maintained her position as darkness deepened, observing the interaction between corporate executives and military contractors. The arrival of Meridian Group leadership transformed the situation from local resistance into a conflict with major corporate interests. "Marcus, implement contingency echo," Sarah instructed through their command channel. The coded order activated pre-planned responses to corporate intervention, utilizing tactics developed through her extensive operational experience. Through their monitored communications, Chen's voice carried cold efficiency. "Colonel, your forces have 12 hours to secure this location. The Meridian Group's board requires confirmation of operational control by morning. Ghost Eye Mitchell's reputation notwithstanding, failure is not an option." The mountain winds shifted again, carrying the sound of corporate helicopters and military vehicles, as Meridian Group committed additional resources to securing Pine Valley. Sarah's reputation had forced them to reveal their corporate involvement, transforming a tactical operation into a strategic confrontation. The revelation of Meridian Group's role elevated the conflict to a level that transcended normal tactical considerations. Sarah's defense of Pine Valley now faced not just military expertise, but corporate power determined to secure its strategic interests. The night ahead would require all the skills that had made her legendary in combat zones, confronting an enemy that combined corporate resources with professional military capabilities. Under the cover of mountain darkness, Sarah Mitchell assessed the transformed tactical situation through her specialized scope. The integration of Meridian Group's corporate security with Aegis's military contractors had created a sophisticated opposition that combined professional expertise with extensive resources. From her elevated position, she observed a methodical preparation for what both sides recognized would be a decisive confrontation. "Multiple teams establishing advanced firing positions," Marcus reported through their secure channel. "They're implementing overlapping coverage patterns, attempting to deny your traditional tactical advantages." Sarah acknowledged the information while calculating new variables. The combined corporate and military forces understood her capabilities well enough to recognize that conventional approaches would prove insufficient. Through their monitored communications, Colonel Richardson's voice carried professional precision. "All units confirm final positions. Mr. Chen requires operational control of the valley by dawn. Ghost Eye Mitchell's resistance ends tonight." The colonel's statement reflected the corporate pressure to resolve the situation quickly, despite his professional understanding of the tactical complexities involved. Michael's voice added crucial intelligence through their command channel, analyzing their deployment patterns. They're establishing 3 distinct operational layers: Aegis's military contractors for direct engagement, Meridian's corporate security for command protection, and specialized counter-sniper teams focusing specifically on your capabilities. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, compensating for changing environmental conditions as the mountain winds shifted. Through her scope, she observed the professional integration of corporate and military elements, noting how their combined expertise created defensive formations that respected her legendary capabilities while working to neutralize them. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted, "final counter-sniper systems are online. Atlas networks showing full coverage of probable firing positions." The colonel's response demonstrated his thorough understanding of the tactical situation. "Maintain maximum alert status. Ghost Eye Mitchell's documented operations suggest she can defeat even our most advanced detection systems." Sarah allowed herself a moment of professional appreciation for their preparation. The combined forces had implemented every available countermeasure, utilizing both military expertise and corporate resources to establish a sophisticated defensive network. Their respect for her capabilities manifested in their meticulous attention to tactical details. Additional movement at the command center, Marcus reported. Meridian Group's security teams are establishing secondary command positions. They're not relying on a single tactical headquarters. Sarah's scope confirmed the assessment, identifying how the corporate security elements had adapted military protocols to protect their strategic interests. Michael's voice carried additional context. Intercepting their tactical updates, they're implementing quantum-encrypted communication protocols. Even their backup systems have redundant security measures. The level of technological sophistication reflected the resources Meridian Group was willing to commit to securing Pine Valley. Interesting approach, Sarah transmitted to her team. But they're assuming conventional tactical responses. Implement Operation Shadow Protocol. The coded command activated carefully prepared countermeasures that would challenge even their advanced security systems. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched Alexander Chen personally reviewing final preparations with his corporate security. Detail. Unlike Richardson's military precision, Chen's approach reflected corporate efficiency, focused on achieving strategic objectives regardless of tactical complications. All units confirm ready status, Richardson transmitted to his forces. Ghost Eye Mitchell's documented operations suggest she may attempt to exploit environmental conditions during the night. Maintain maximum situational awareness. The Colonel's warning demonstrated his professional respect for her capabilities, even under corporate pressure to resolve the situation quickly. Sarah maintained her observation as the combined forces completed their preparations, watching how military expertise merged with corporate efficiency to create a formidable opposition. Unlike previous confrontations, this enemy understood both her tactical capabilities and the strategic implications of their objectives. Marcus, verify all defensive positions, Sarah instructed through their command channel. Ensure our prepared countermeasures remain undetected. The methodical confirmation process reflected her own professional attention to tactical details, honed through years of combat operations. Through their monitored channels, Chen's voice carried corporate authority. Colonel, your forces have committed significant resources to counter one operator. Explain why such extensive preparation is necessary. Richardson's response reflected his military experience. Sir, Ghost Eye Mitchell's combat record includes operations that redefined what we considered tactically possible. Underestimating her capabilities would be a serious strategic error. Sarah adjusted her scope settings to account for deteriorating light conditions, noting how the combined forces had positioned themselves to minimize exposure to her documented shooting patterns. Their defensive formations reflected intimate knowledge of her combat record, implementing countermeasures based on analyzed data from her classified operations. The mountain winds carried the sound of final preparations as corporate and military elements readied themselves for decisive action. Sarah's reputation had forced them to commit unprecedented resources, combining professional military expertise with corporate efficiency in attempting to neutralize her capabilities. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched the sophisticated integration of corporate and military forces, recognizing that the coming confrontation would require every bit of skill and experience that had earned her legendary status. The defense of Pine Valley would demonstrate why certain combat operations remained classified, why some capabilities exceeded normal tactical expectations even when facing professionally prepared opposition. The first phase of Meridian Group's coordinated offensive began precisely at midnight, demonstrating the sophisticated integration of corporate resources and military expertise. Through her specialized scope, Sarah Mitchell observed multiple tactical teams advancing undercover. of advanced technological systems designed to counter her documented capabilities. 3 primary assault groups detected, Marcus reported through their secure channel. They're implementing synchronized movement patterns, attempting to control probable engagement zones. Sarah maintained her observation while calculating new variables, noting how the combined forces utilized both Aegis's military precision and Meridian's corporate efficiency. Colonel Richardson's voice carried professional authority through their monitored communications. All units execute Phase 1. Primary objective is to restrict targets' operational mobility while establishing controlled sectors. The tactical implementation reflected his extensive special operations experience, even as corporate pressure influenced strategic objectives. Michael provided crucial intelligence through their command channel. Their Atlas systems are actively scanning all elevated positions. They're using predictive algorithms to identify potential firing solutions based on your documented operations. Sarah acknowledged the information, recognizing how their technological sophistication complicated traditional tactical responses. Through her scope, Sarah watched Alexander Chen monitoring the operation from Meridian's reinforced command center, his corporate authority evident in how military contractors adjusted their tactics to align with strategic objectives. "Colonel," Chen transmitted, "your forces have 30 minutes to secure the primary sectors. The board expects immediate results." Sarah adjusted her position slightly, compensating for environmental changes as assault teams established interlocking fields of fire designed to restrict her tactical options. Their approach demonstrated intimate familiarity with her combat record, implementing countermeasures specifically developed to neutralize her exceptional capabilities. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders reported, "counter-sniper systems detecting unusual atmospheric disturbances, standard targeting algorithms showing inconsistent results." The colonel's response reflected his professional understanding. Ghost Eye Mitchell is documented manipulating environmental conditions to defeat advanced tracking systems, implement adaptive protocols. Sarah maintained tactical discipline as combined corporate and military elements executed their carefully prepared assault. Through their secure channel, Marcus provided ongoing tactical assessment. They're establishing overlapping coverage zones, using advanced optics to monitor all potential firing positions. Professional implementation of counter-sniper protocols. Michael's voice added critical context, intercepting their tactical data streams. They're utilizing quantum computing to process environmental variables in real time, attempting to predict possible engagement parameters. In Doom, the technological sophistication demonstrated Meridian Group's commitment to achieving their strategic objectives regardless of tactical complications. Through her specialized scope, Sarah observed how corporate efficiency enhanced military precision as assault teams secured key tactical positions. Richardson's forces demonstrated professional respect for her capabilities, even while implementing Chen's aggressive timeline for establishing operational control. "All units be advised," Richardson transmitted. "Target has extensive experience defeating conventional tactical approaches. Maintain maximum security protocols regardless of corporate objectives." The colonel's warning reflected his understanding that Sarah's documented operations often transcended normal tactical expectations. Sarah watched the sophisticated deployment through her scope, noting how combined forces utilized advanced technology to complement professional expertise. Their assault pattern demonstrated both military experience and corporate resources, creating a complex tactical environment that respected her capabilities while working to neutralize them. "Additional movement detected," Marcus reported. "They're activating secondary tactical elements, establishing redundant coverage patterns." The professional thoroughness of their approach confirmed how seriously they regarded the threat her capabilities represented, even with their sophisticated technological advantages. Through monitored communications, Chen's voice carried corporate authority. "Colonel, your forces have committed significant resources to counter one operator. The board requires demonstrable progress within the established timeline." Richardson's response maintained professional focus. "Sir, underestimating Ghost Eye Mitchell's capabilities would compromise both tactical and strategic objectives." Sarah adjusted her scope settings as assault teams continued their systematic advance, noting how they combined military protocols with corporate efficiency to create a sophisticated offensive operation. Their approach demonstrated both professional respect for her abilities and corporate determination to achieve strategic objectives. The mountain winds carried the sound of coordinated movement as combined forces executed their carefully prepared assault. Sarah's reputation had forced them to implement unprecedented tactical sophistication, integrating corporate resources with military expertise in attempting to neutralize her legendary capabilities. Through her specialized scope, Sarah observed the continuing assault as corporate and military elements demonstrated why they represented such a formidable opposition. The defense of Pine Valley would require every bit of skill and experience that had earned her whispered reputation in combat zones, confronting an enemy that combined professional expertise with virtually unlimited resources. Their initial assault phase demonstrated both tactical sophistication and strategic determination, but Sarah maintained her disciplined observation, recognizing that this corporate military offensive represented merely the first movement in a complex operational symphony. The night ahead would demonstrate why certain combat capabilities remained classified, even when facing professionally prepared opposition backed by corporate resources. The tactical situation in Pine Valley reached a critical turning point as Alexander Chen's mounting frustration began to manifest in increasingly aggressive operational directives. Through her specialized scope, Sarah Mitchell observed the pronounced shift in strategy as Meridian Group abandoned their initially measured approach in favor of overwhelming force, regardless of tactical consequences. Multiple assault teams moving with accelerated protocols, Marcus reported through their secure channel, his voice carrying professional concern. They're sacrificing tactical discipline for speed, responding to direct corporate pressure. 3 teams advancing on the western approach, 2 more establishing aggressive positions near the town's center. Sarah maintained her disciplined observation while calculating how their decreased precision created exploitable vulnerabilities, even as their increased aggression complicated defensive options. Colonel Richardson's voice carried clear tension. Through their monitored communications, "Mr. Chen, accelerating our assault timeline fundamentally compromises established security protocols. Ghost Eye Mitchell's documented capabilities require methodical countermeasures. Rushing our advance creates unnecessary tactical vulnerability." The corporate executive's response reflected growing impatience. "Your tactical concerns are noted, Colonel. However, the board requires immediate resolution. The Meridian Group has committed significant resources to this operation, and we expect proportional results." Through their command channel, Michael provided critical intelligence, intercepting updated tactical directives. Meridian Group is committing substantial additional resources, including experimental counter-sniper systems not yet approved for military deployment. Their quantum processing units are attempting to predict firing solutions based on environmental variables, but the rushed calibration is creating significant margin for error. Sarah acknowledged the information, recognizing how corporate desperation was increasingly overriding military expertise. Sarah made subtle adjustments to her position as Chen's accelerated timeline forced assault teams to abandon their carefully prepared protocols in favor of aggressive advancement. Through her scope, she observed how mounting corporate pressure degraded professional discipline, creating tactical opportunities that even their sophisticated technology couldn't compensate for. The Atlas targeting systems, rushed into deployment without proper calibration, struggled to maintain accurate tracking in the complex mountain environment. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted with evident concern, "rushed deployment is creating substantial gaps in our counter-sniper coverage. The Atlas systems require precise calibration to maintain effective tracking, particularly in these mountain conditions. Current advancement speed is compromising system accuracy by at least 30%. Chen's response demonstrated absolute prioritization of corporate objectives over tactical considerations. Acceptable risk factor. Maintain accelerated advancement. Time is now our primary constraint. Sarah watched through her specialized optics as corporate authority increasingly overrode military expertise. Richardson's operators maintained their professional capabilities, but their tactical effectiveness suffered significantly as Meridian Group's aggressive timeline forced them to compromise established protocols. The sophisticated integration of corporate and military elements that had initially made them so formidable began to fragment under the pressure of competing priorities. "Additional corporate security teams deploying," Marcus reported, his voice reflecting careful analysis. "They're implementing aggressive protocols, distinct from Aegis's military doctrine, counting 12 new teams, moving with corporate efficiency but limited tactical awareness. Their movement patterns suggest minimal combat experience despite professional training." The observation confirmed Sarah's assessment that corporate pressure was fragmenting the previously coordinated operation into increasingly discordant tactical approaches. Michael's voice added crucial context. "Analysis of their communications indicates growing tension between corporate and military elements. Chen's aggressive timeline is creating serious operational conflicts. Intercepted transmissions show multiple tactical commanders expressing concern about compromised protocols. Corporate security teams are operating on separate communications channels, further degrading coordinated response capabilities." Through her scope, Sarah observed Chen personally directing corporate security teams to implement aggressive protocols that directly contradicted Richardson's established tactical framework. The corporate executives' determination to achieve immediate results continued to undermine the professional discipline that had initially made their combined forces such a significant threat. Their sophisticated technology, rushed into deployment without proper preparation, became increasingly unreliable as corporate pressure mounted. "All units be advised," Richardson transmitted with measured authority, attempting to maintain tactical discipline despite mounting pressure. "Maintain established security protocols regardless of modified timeline. Ghost Eye Mitchell's capabilities demand precise countermeasures. Rushed advancement compromises our tactical advantage." Chen's immediate override demonstrated the complete shift to corporate control. "Belay that order. All teams execute accelerated protocols immediately. Achievement of objectives takes absolute priority over tactical considerations." Sarah maintained her disciplined observation as Meridian Group's aggressive acceleration created increasing tactical disorder throughout their operation. Their sophisticated technology and professional expertise became progressively less effective, as corporate pressure forced them to abandon careful protocols in favor of rapid advancement. The mountain winds carried the sound of increasingly aggressive movement, as Meridian Group's corporate pressure transformed careful tactical implementation into rushed advancement. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched the continuing degradation of their coordinated operation as corporate authority increasingly overrode military expertise. Chen's aggressive timeline forced professional operators to implement tactically suspect protocols that compromised their sophisticated countermeasures. The night's escalating confrontation demonstrated how corporate pressure could fundamentally compromise professional military expertise, transforming sophisticated tactical operations into increasingly desperate attempts to achieve immediate results. Sarah's disciplined observation confirmed that Meridian Group's aggressive acceleration would ultimately create opportunities for the kind of precise response that had made her legendary in combat zones. Their rushed deployment and compromised protocols presented vulnerabilities that even their advanced technology couldn't compensate for, setting the stage for a decisive demonstration of why certain combat capabilities remained classified, even when facing professionally prepared opposition backed by corporate resources. Alexander Chen's aggressive acceleration reached its climax as midnight approached Pine Valley. Through her specialized scope, Sarah Mitchell observed the chaotic culmination of corporate pressure, overwhelming military expertise, creating the precise tactical conditions she had anticipated since the confrontation began. Multiple units converging on suspected positions, Marcus reported through their secure channel. Their rushed deployment has created significant tactical gaps. Corporate security teams are operating without proper coordination with Aegis's military elements. Sarah maintained her disciplined observation, recognizing that Chen's desperation had finally created the perfect conditions for a decisive response. Colonel Richardson's voice carried resigned professionalism through their monitored communications. "Mr. Chen, our tactical integrity is completely compromised. Ghost Eye Mitchell's documented capabilities specifically exploit this type of aggressive, uncoordinated advancement." The corporate executive's response reflected total commitment to immediate resolution. "Your objections are noted, Colonel. All units execute final assault protocols. This ends now." Through their command channel, Michael provided critical intelligence. Their Atlas systems are showing significant targeting errors due to rushed calibration. Quantum processing units are generating contradictory firing solutions. Corporate pressure has effectively neutralized their technological advantage. Sarah acknowledged the information while making final adjustments to her firing position. Sarah watched through her specialized scope as Chen personally directed the final phase of their assault, corporate authority completely superseding military expertise. The sophisticated integration of forces that had initially made them formidable had devolved into competing tactical approaches, creating perfect conditions for the kind of precision response that had made her legendary in combat zones. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted urgently, "counter-sniper systems are showing multiple anomalies. Environmental variables exceed rushed calibration parameters. We've lost effective targeting capability." Chen's response demonstrated complete abandonment of tactical consideration. "Proceed with advancement. Overwhelm the target with superior numbers." Sarah initiated her prepared response sequence, decades of combat experience guiding each precise movement. Her first shot, a masterpiece of calculated precision, disabled the primary Atlas targeting system with surgical accuracy, the sound of impact reaching them long after the effect became apparent. "Primary targeting system disabled," Marcus reported, professional satisfaction evident in his tone. Their rushed deployment left critical infrastructure exposed. Corporate security teams are responding with uncoordinated aggression. Sarah's second shot eliminated their backup targeting system, demonstrating why her capabilities had become legendary even among special operations veterans. Michael's voice added crucial context, intercepting their tactical communications. Complete breakdown of coordinated response. Corporate security teams operating independently of military protocols. Chen's aggressive timeline has eliminated their tactical coherence. The observation confirmed that corporate pressure had created perfect conditions for Sarah's precise response. Through her scope, Sarah watched Chen's mounting frustration as his accelerated timeline backfired spectacularly. Each precisely calculated shot disabled critical elements of their sophisticated infrastructure, systematically dismantling the technological advantage they had rushed into deployment without proper preparation. "All units be advised," Richardson transmitted with professional recognition. "Target is systematically exploiting our compromised deployment. Ghost Eye Mitchell's documented capabilities specifically excel at punishing tactical errors." Chen's response reflected growing desperation. "Commit all remaining resources. Overwhelm the target through superior numbers, regardless of tactical cost." Sarah maintained her disciplined response as corporate pressure continued degrading their tactical effectiveness. Her next series of shots, each a demonstration of exceptional precision, systematically disabled their communications infrastructure, further fragmenting their already compromised coordination. "Sir," Richardson addressed Chen directly, "through remaining communication channels, we've lost effective command and control capability. Ghost Eye Mitchell is executing a precision response that specifically exploits our rushed deployment." The corporate executive's response reflected final recognition of his strategic error. How is one operator systematically dismantling our entire operation? Through her specialized scope, Sarah continued her methodical response. Each shot, calculated to exploit the vulnerabilities created by corporate pressure, overwhelming military expertise. Chen's aggressive timeline had transformed their sophisticated operation into a perfect demonstration of why her capabilities remained legendary in special operations circles. The mountain winds carried the sound of systematic precision as Sarah's calculated response continued dismantling their rushed deployment. Corporate pressure had created perfect conditions for demonstrating why certain combat capabilities remained classified, even when facing professionally prepared opposition backed by significant resources. Sarah observed through her scope as Chen finally recognized the magnitude of his tactical error. His aggressive acceleration had completely compromised their sophisticated countermeasures, creating perfect conditions for the kind of precise response that defined her combat reputation. The night's culmination demonstrated why corporate pressure could never overcome properly applied military expertise, especially when facing capabilities that transcended normal tactical parameters. "All units fall back to defensive positions," Richardson transmitted, professional assessment recognizing the inevitable outcome. Ghost Eye Mitchell has achieved complete tactical advantage. Continued aggressive advancement merely compounds our vulnerability. Chen's silence reflected final acceptance that corporate pressure had transformed their sophisticated operation into a perfect demonstration of legendary capabilities. The systematic precision of Sarah's response continued until Meridian Group's aggressive operation was completely dismantled, demonstrating why certain combat capabilities remained whispered about in special operations circles. Corporate pressure had created perfect conditions for showing exactly why some tactical parameters remained classified, even when facing professionally prepared opposition backed by virtually unlimited resources. In the pre-dawn hours following, Sarah Mitchell's systematic dismantling of Meridian Group's operation, Pine Valley began its transformation from battleground to embodiment of resilient community strength. Through her specialized scope, Sarah observed Alexander Chen and Colonel Richardson engaging in tense discussion at their compromised command center, corporate authority finally yielding to military reality. Multiple units initiating organized withdrawal, Marcus reported through their secure channel. Corporate security teams are evacuating high-value assets, while Aegis's military elements maintain professional coverage of their retreat. Sarah maintained her observation as the sophisticated opposition she had systematically defeated began their disciplined departure from Pine Valley. Through their monitored communications, Richardson's voice carried professional acknowledgement. "Mr. Chen, Ghost Eye Mitchell's precision response has completely neutralized our tactical options. Continuing this operation merely risks further demonstration of her exceptional capabilities." The corporate executive's response reflected reluctant acceptance. "Initiate full withdrawal. The board will need to reassess strategic objectives." Regarding Pine Valley, Michael provided crucial intelligence through their command channel, intercepting corporate communications. Meridian Group's board is already discussing significant strategic revisions. Their entire regional development plan requires adjustment based on this tactical failure. Sarah acknowledged the information while watching the coordinated withdrawal of forces she had systematically outmaneuvered. Sarah observed through her scope as Chen personally supervised the evacuation of Meridian's corporate resources, his earlier aggressive confidence replaced by careful efficiency. The sophisticated technology and professional expertise that had initially made them such formidable opposition now focused entirely on executing a disciplined withdrawal from Pine Valley. "Sir," one of Richardson's team leaders transmitted, "all advanced targeting systems have been successfully disabled. Ghost Eye Mitchell's precision response exploited every vulnerability created by our rushed deployment." Chen's response demonstrated complete reversal of his earlier aggressive stance. "Ensure all technical data is secured. The board will require complete analysis of tactical failures." Sarah maintained her observation as combined corporate and military elements executed their withdrawal. Through their secure channel, Marcus provided ongoing assessment. They're implementing professional evacuation protocols. Both corporate security and military contractors displaying disciplined departure procedures despite tactical defeat. Michael's voice added critical context. "Analysis of their communications indicates fundamental strategic reassessment. Meridian Group's entire approach to regional development requires revision based on demonstrated community resistance capabilities." The observation confirmed that Sarah's systematic response had achieved more than tactical victory. It had forced corporate recognition of community strength. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched the continuing transformation as Pine Valley emerged from tactical confrontation into renewed community vitality. Tom Harper's general store had already reopened, becoming a symbol of resilient local business surviving corporate pressure. Other community members began emerging, their coordinated resistance transforming into organized recovery. "All units confirm withdrawal status," Richardson transmitted with professional precision. "Ghost Eye Mitchell's capabilities have been comprehensively demonstrated. Further tactical engagement serves no strategic purpose." Chen's response reflected corporate acceptance of reality. "Confirmed. Full withdrawal authorized. Meridian Group recognizes the necessity of strategic reassessment." Sarah observed through her scope as sophisticated opposition forces completed their disciplined departure from Pine Valley. Their professional withdrawal demonstrated respect for capabilities that had systematically dismantled their advanced technology and tactical expertise, creating space for community renewal to begin. "Additional movement in town," Marcus reported. "Local businesses reopening, community members reclaiming public spaces. Pine Valley is already demonstrating resilient recovery. The observation confirmed Sarah's assessment that tactical victory had enabled broader community transformation. Through monitored communications, Chen addressed Richardson directly. "Colonel, ensure all tactical data is preserved. Meridian Group requires complete analysis of how one operator systematically neutralized our entire operation." The colonel's response reflected professional understanding. "Sir, Ghost Eye Mitchell's reputation exists for valid reasons. Some capabilities transcend corporate resources." Sarah maintained her disciplined observation as Pine Valley's transformation continued. The mountain sunrise revealed a community emerging stronger from tactical confrontation, their coordinated resistance having proved more powerful than corporate pressure or military expertise. Through her scope, she watched citizens reclaiming their town with renewed confidence. The morning light painted Pine Valley in transformative colors as sophisticated opposition forces completed their withdrawal. Sarah's systematic demonstration of legendary capabilities had not only achieved tactical victory, but had forced corporate recognition that some communities could not be conquered through aggressive pressure or advanced technology. Through her specialized scope, Sarah observed the final phases of corporate military withdrawal, while Pine Valley demonstrated its renewed strength. The coordinated departure of forces she had systematically defeated created space for community resilience to fully emerge, transforming tactical victory into lasting transformation. "Sir," Richardson transmitted to Chen as their evacuation neared completion, "Ghost Eye Mitchell's precision response has implications beyond tactical defeat. Meridian Group's entire strategic approach requires fundamental reconsideration." At the B, corporate executives' response reflected hard-learned wisdom. "Agreed, Colonel. Some capabilities and some communities demand more respect than corporate pressure can overcome." The morning's transformation demonstrated that Sarah's tactical victory had achieved more than military success. It had enabled Pine Valley to emerge as a symbol of community strength prevailing over corporate power. The systematic precision of her response had not only defeated sophisticated opposition, but had created space for lasting positive change in the community she had chosen to protect. The weeks following Meridian Group's withdrawal from Pine Valley brought transformative changes that extended far beyond the mountain community. Through her specialized scope, Sarah Mitchell observed new activity in the surrounding towns, not corporate forces or military contractors, but communities beginning to organize their own resistance networks, inspired by Pine Valley's successful stand. "Multiple regional communications detected," Marcus reported through their secure channel. "Carson Valley and Pine Ridge are implementing similar defensive protocols. Our successful resistance has created a blueprint for other communities." Sarah maintained her observation while recognizing how tactical victory had evolved into regional transformation. Through monitored channels, they intercepted corporate communications, revealing the broader impact. Michael's voice provided crucial analysis. Meridian Group's board is completely revising their regional strategy. Their tactical defeat in Pine Valley has forced fundamental reconsideration of aggressive corporate expansion. Other communities are being deemed high risk for similar resistance. Sarah watched through her scope as Pine Valley itself continued evolving into a model of community resilience. Tom Harper's General Store had become an informal teaching center, where representatives from other towns came to learn about coordinated resistance techniques. The hardware store, once threatened by corporate pressure, now specialized in equipment supporting community defense networks. "Interesting development from Carson Valley," Marcus noted. "They've already prevented a corporate takeover attempt, used our defensive protocols, demonstrated unified community resistance. The corporate forces withdrew without escalation." Sarah allowed herself a slight smile, recognizing how their tactical success had created lasting regional impact. Through their secure communications, Michael provided additional context, analyzing regional corporate activities. Major development companies are revising their approach to small community acquisitions. Pine Valley's resistance has forced them to consider community rights and local autonomy. The corporate playbook is being rewritten. Sarah maintained her observation as Pine Valley's influence continued spreading through mountain communities. Jenny Peterson's father had organized a regional business alliance, helping other towns establish economic resilience against corporate pressure. The coordination that had proved so effective during tactical resistance now supported broader community empowerment. "Sir," a corporate analyst reported in an intercepted transmission to Meridian's board, "the Pine Valley incident has created significant strategic complications. Other communities are implementing similar resistance protocols. Our traditional acquisition methods are becoming increasingly ineffective." The board's response reflected fundamental strategic reassessment. Full revision of regional development approach required. Community resistance capabilities must be respected. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched as Pine Valley evolved from tactical victory into regional inspiration. The precision capabilities that had defeated sophisticated opposition now supported teaching other communities how to protect themselves. Her military expertise had created space for lasting positive transformation. Additional community networks forming, Marcus reported. 3 more towns implementing coordinated resistance protocols. They're sharing resources, establishing mutual support systems. The regional dynamic is fundamentally changing. The observation confirmed that tactical success had enabled broader strategic transformation. Michael's voice added crucial context. Corporate intelligence agencies are reporting increased community organization throughout the region. They're specifically citing the Pine Valley Protocol as a model for effective resistance. Your tactical victory has become a strategic template. Sarah observed through her scope as sophisticated corporate opposition gave way to community empowerment. The precision response that had defeated advanced technology and military expertise now supported teaching other communities how to maintain their independence. Tactical excellence had created space for lasting positive change. Through monitored communications, corporate analysts continued reporting the spreading impact. Regional development strategies require complete revision. Communities are implementing coordinated resistance protocols. Traditional corporate pressure tactics have become tactically unsound. The assessment confirmed that Pine Valley's success had forced fundamental changes in corporate approach to community development. Sarah maintained her disciplined observation as the regional transformation continued. Emma's math scores had improved significantly, no longer distracted by corporate threats. The community that had unified in resistance now thrived in peace, becoming stronger through helping others achieve similar independence. Remarkable development from Pine Ridge, Marcus reported. Their community council unanimously rejected corporate acquisition attempts, used our protocols to demonstrate unified resistance capability. Corporate forces withdrew without deploying. The observation confirmed that tactical victory had evolved into strategic transformation. Through their secure channel, Michael provided ongoing analysis. Corporate strategic revisions continue. Major development companies are establishing community relations protocols. Pine Valley's resistance has forced fundamental changes in how corporations approach small-town acquisitions. Your tactical victory has achieved lasting strategic impact. Sarah watched through her scope as Pine Valley's influence spread through mountain communities. The precision capabilities that had defeated sophisticated opposition now supported broader regional transformation. Her military expertise had created space for communities to discover their own strength. The morning sun painted transformed communities in hopeful light as Sarah observed the lasting impact of their tactical victory. Corporate power had yielded to community strength. Sophisticated opposition had been overcome by coordinated resistance, and military expertise had created space for lasting positive change. Through her specialized scope, Sarah watched Pine Valley and surrounding communities continue their evolution from tactical success to strategic transformation. The precision response that had defeated advanced technology and corporate pressure now supported teaching other communities how to maintain their independence, creating lasting positive impact that extended far beyond original tactical victory. The future impact of Pine Valley's successful resistance continued expanding, transforming tactical victory into regional empowerment. Sarah's legendary capabilities had not only defeated sophisticated opposition, but had created space for communities to discover their own strength, demonstrating that coordinated resistance could overcome even the most determined corporate pressure. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.